We live in the most hyper-connected era in human history, yet we are currently living through a documented epidemic of profound loneliness. We are surrounded by data and networks, yet somehow we are more isolated than ever. This cultural isolation isn't a glitch in our technology. It's a side effect of a flawed Western definition of what a human being actually is. The problem traces back to ancient Greece. Plato popularized a strict dualism, dividing reality into two realms, the pure, eternal mind on one side and the temporary material world on the other. And Aristotle took this further by defining reality through individual, self-contained substances. In his framework, everything is evaluated as an independent entity, which leaves very little room for relationships to define a thing's existence. This logic eventually formed the defining mantras of the West. The philosopher Boethius defined a person as an individual substance of a rational nature. Centuries later, René Descartes cemented this inward focus with his famous deduction, "I think, therefore I am." These ideas created a trap. If we define ourselves primarily as isolated, self-contained minds floating through the world, our culture will inevitably produce deep relational isolation. Scottish theologian Thomas F. Torrance saw this individualistic view as a complete distortion of the biblical imago Dei, the concept that humans are created in the image of God. Torrance argued that as long as we view ourselves as independent observers, separated from the world and each other, we will never understand our true identity. To fix this, Torrance borrowed a concept from the scientific revolution. Physicists like Albert Einstein demanded that we observe the universe according to its actual nature, rather than projecting our human assumptions onto it. Torrance himself called this a cataphysical method. His logic was simple. If a human being is a copy, we have to abandon our philosophical guesswork. To figure out what the copy is supposed to look like, we first have to analyze the nature of the original, the nature of God. Torrance looked back to the Nicene theologians of the 4th century. These thinkers were forced to rigorously define God's nature to combat the Arian heresy, which claimed Jesus was a created being rather than fully divine. The Nicene writers made a theological breakthrough. They realized that God's very being, his ousia, is not a static, lonely, or isolated monolith. This Trinity reveals God exists eternally as three distinct persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, locked in a continuous interpersonal relationship. From this, they derived a core principle. Within God's nature, to be is to be in communion. Existence itself is relational. Torrance takes this divine blueprint and maps it directly onto humanity. This is his concept of the relational imago Dei. Because we are made in the image of a triune God, human beings are onto-relational, meaning our relationships are part of our very existence. Because God is a communion, we do not simply have relationships. Our relationships literally constitute who we are. This relational identity plays across two inseparable axes. First, the vertical axis. Our existence is sustained by an active relationship with God's Spirit. Second, the horizontal axis, co-humanity. We are created for self-giving love, mirroring human-to-human social union. A human being is only fully human and fully reflecting the image of God when both the vertical tether to the Creator and the horizontal bond to others are intact. In Torrance's framework, sin functions as a structural alienation. If our personhood is literally built out of our relationships, then choosing to sever those axes, turning inward to live as isolated individuals, acts as a destructive force. We experience a literal loss of our humanity because the connections that constitute us are snapping apart. This is where Jesus Christ enters Torrance's lens, acting specifically as the personalizing person. By perfectly uniting divinity and humanity in one person, Christ acts as the ontological linchpin. He repairs the vertical communion with God that we could not sustain on our own. This vertical repair is the prerequisite for all other healing. We can only begin to repair our horizontal relationships with others once our vertical relationship with the Creator has been restored by Christ. The relational imago Dei provides a concrete mandate for social ethics and community behavior. Because the Trinity consists of distinct persons sharing one equal nature, Torrance argues that human society must mirror this co-humanity. This theological blueprint directly fuels his advocacy for gender equality. If we are truly persons in relation, then no human can ever be treated as a lesser substance or an isolated object. We are not brains in jars. We are living mirrors of a triune, communal God. Descartes had it backwards. The definition of humanity is not, I think, therefore I am. It is, we relate, therefore we are.